we made the planter beds. We've tested and done some troubleshooting on the water retention abilities of our design. And now we got to fill them up. And this is how you start. Stand by. Hey everybody, welcome back to Mrs. RATTLECAN'S house. I am James, and today we're going to start making our potting mix for our beds. We want them to draw or to wick moisture out of our reservoirs easily. In case of heavy rains, we also want them to drain excess moisture easily. And to do that, we kind of have to do a couple of things. Number one, we don't put dirt in there. We don't put soil in there because there's just not the ability to move moisture in that manner. So we're going to make a mixture very similar to what you would get if you bought a bag of potting mix at the store. But in order to do it on the scale we're doing it on, you have to buy it in bulk, and you make it yourselves. Otherwise, it gets just crazy. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this recipe. I basically have got a 35 cubic foot planter bed. And in order to get the mixture that I want, I'm going to make 14 parts of that peat moss, 7 parts of that pine bark, 7 parts of that vermiculite, 7 parts of that perlite. That gives me 35 cubic feet. And that should give me a good enough mixture so that I can move moisture up or down as it's needed, and also be able to hold the fertilizer, the nutrients that we're going to provide our plants, give them a nice base to grow their big strong roots in. So anyways, it's a dirty, dusty job. You mix it on a big tarp. You kind of put your ingredients on it. And then you just move the sides of the tarp back and forth, and pretty quickly it'll mix up nicely. Now my friend Elizabeth, who also happens to be one of the owners down at Metal Supermarkets, who helped supply us with the angle iron that we use to put our beds together, also shot me something from the Square Foot Gardener of a very similar way to mix big batches of potting mix. I learned how to make potting mix when I went to school at Western Iowa Tech, and we actually mixed it we had a big mixing table that we mixed it in when we did our greenhouse segments of the courses. But this tarp method is what's going to work best for us. You're probably going to want to wear a mask just because there's going to be a lot of loose, fine particulate matter in the air. We're going to mist it just to kind of keep the dust down, not really to add a whole lot of moisture to it, but just to make it easier to mix. And then as we add it to our beds, first of all, it's going to immediately pick up the moisture that's already in the reservoir parts of it, and as we fill this up, it's going to start adding it up. Now, we're going to mix this in 2 parts, as my wife tries to run me over, and we're going to mix this up in 2 parts. We're going to do half of the bed at a time, just because mixing up 30 cubic feet of material is kind of a haul. So anyways, let's get to it. Okay, with any luck, this is going to be the last time that we actually see the inside of these planter beds. And I have discovered that this bed failed my overnight leak test. And very quickly, I was able to find where that leak was. And so now we're just going to blob it with some silicone, and then hopefully we'll be done with this part of it. All right, here's our mix. I don't have it really wet because I don't want to move water. Water's heavy. So now we're going to scoop it, and we're going to start loading our beds up. Okay, we've changed one thing in the second batch of the potting mix that's going in this upper half of the bed. As I kick the camera all over the place, I didn't like. I made a mistake at the store. There was an open bag of this pine bark. And when I stuck my hand in, pulled it out, they were nice and small. And when we get them back here, well, they got a bunch of really big chunks in them. And I'm not entirely happy with that. It's probably not a disaster. I just don't think it's ideal. So what I've done is I've taken a piece of that 1/2-inch square hardware cloth, and I've made a screen panel. And screened out about, I don't know, 2/3 of that bag. And so we're going to put that, the small siftings in. I'm going to get another piece of maybe 1-inch hardware screen, see if I can find some of that. And that'll just get the big monster stuff out of that. So we're just going to continue filling that up, and I got to get a battery charged real quick. All right, the end of a very long day. I ended up using, in my calculations, I had like a cubic foot left out of each one of my ingredients, and I ended up using all of them. So instead of 7 cubic feet of vermiculite, it got 8. Same thing with the perlite. The pine bark, the bottom half of this has gotten 2 bags of that, but as I mentioned earlier, I don't like those big chunks. So I'm going to look for a solution on that tomorrow. And but the top half of the bed has got probably a half of a bag of pine bark, the small pieces of pine bark. And instead of having a leftover third of a peat moss bag, I ended up dumping that in there too. So it is nice and loose, nice and light. I have spent a number of minutes with a hose in that fill tube. And on the 5th short session, I finally started to get some little drips out of our irrigation tube. So it seems to be wicking along quite nicely. I've watered it and mixed it and watered it and mixed it. And now the only thing left to do is get a landscape fabric cover cut for the top of the soil, because it's going to be a few days before we actually decide what's getting planted. I'm just the muscle for this. Mrs. Rattlecan is the one doing all the research and trying to figure out what goes where, and you know, she's way smarter than I am, so she's taking care of all of that. So the leak that we had earlier down in that section fixed. So now tomorrow I have to find 3/4 inch or inch hardware cloth. I have to find vermiculite, and then I can mix up another bed worth of material. And now we'll just see if the weather cooperates. So anyways, that's how it's going. Questions, shoot them to me in the comments down below the sermon notes. I may or may not have a good answer for you. And if not, I'll at least try to point you to someone that can get you a good answer. Anyways, you guys have a good one. Remember, if I can do it, you can do it. Cheers.
If you enjoyed watching this episode of Mrs. Rattlecan's House, consider checking out this video. Be sure to subscribe to us on YouTube, and to get the latest updates on our progress, like us on Facebook. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again soon.
Perhaps we should have some wine.